Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere that might just change everything you thought you knew about beauty, vanity, and the ancient world. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're standing in complete darkness, and slowly, gradually, the first golden rays of dawn begin to break over the longest river on earth. You can hear it, the gentle lapping of the Nile against papyrus reeds, the distant cry of an ibis, and somewhere in the warm darkness, the soft grinding of stone against stone as someone prepares the pigments that will transform their face into something more than human. You see, tonight we're traveling back over 4,000 years to explore something absolutely extraordinary, something that archaeology has only recently begun to fully understand. The ancient Egyptians didn't just wear makeup, they weaponized it, they ritualized it, they quite literally died for it. And before we journey together into this mesmerizing world, I'd love it if you felt moved to subscribe and leave a like, but only if tonight's story truly resonates with you. I'm also so curious, where are you right now as you're listening? Are you curled up under your covers? Or maybe you're watching the stars from your window? Drop a comment and let me know. I genuinely love hearing from you, our wonderful community of nighttime history lovers scattered across the globe. Now get comfortable. Let the weight of your body sink deeper into wherever you're resting. Feel your breathing slow. Because tonight, you're going to discover that everything you think you know about beauty standards, about makeup, about vanity itself, is about to be turned completely upside down. The story begins not with a mirror, but with a belief so profound it shaped an entire civilization. The ancient Egyptians understood something we've almost forgotten: that the face you show the world isn't just about attraction or status. For them, it was about survival in this life and passage into the next. Your physical appearance was quite literally a matter of eternal life or eternal death. And the lengths they went to, the risks they took, the hours they devoted every single day to transformation, well, it's almost until you see the evidence with your own eyes. Museum of Art houses thousands of ancient Egyptian cosmetic tools, and when researchers analyzed the residue on these implements, they found something shocking. Many of the most prized beauty products contained lead sulfide, copper, and even arsenic. Yes, arsenic. The very substances that made Egyptian eyes so dramatically beautiful were slowly poisoning them. Let me paint you a picture of what a typical morning looked like for an upper-class Egyptian woman. Let's call her Nefret. She'd wake before dawn, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the gentle chanting of her personal beautician, who was actually considered a type of priest. First, Nefret would undergo what archaeologist Dr. Zahi Hawass calls the purification ritual. This involved washing with natron salt, the same substance used in mummification. Already we can see the connection between daily beauty and death preparation. The water came from sacred temple wells and was often infused with lotus petals, which the Egyptians believed carried the essence of rebirth. Now here's something that'll blow your mind. Egyptians didn't just put on makeup to look pretty. According to the Abus papyrus, which dates back to 1550 BCE, they believed that certain cosmetic applications could literally ward off evil spirits. But let's talk about the economic side of this beauty obsession, because it's absolutely staggering. The ancient Egyptian beauty industry was worth what would be equivalent to about $2, 3 billion in today's money. According to economic historians at Cambridge University, Cleopatra alone spent what amounts to $12 million annually just on her personal cosmetics. To put that in perspective, she spent more on makeup than some small countries spend on their entire military budgets today. The most coveted ingredient was something called udu, green malachite powder that came exclusively from mines in the Sinai Peninsula. This wasn't just expensive, it was literally worth more, because having the perfect green eyeshadow could mean the difference between being accepted by the gods or being condemned to spiritual darkness. And here's something that would probably surprise modern beauty influences. Men wore just as much makeup as women, sometimes more. King Tutankhamun's tomb contained over 100 pots of cosmetics, creams, and perfumed oils. When Howard Carter first opened that tomb in 1922, he found that some of these cosmetics were still perfectly preserved, and get this, still fragrant after 3,000 years. The formulations were so advanced that modern cosmetic companies are still trying to reverse engineer some of these ancient recipes. They weren't just getting ready for today or this week or even this lifetime. Every single day they were preparing for eternity. The British Museum houses a collection of mirrors from ancient Egypt, and many of them are inscribed with prayers asking the gods to maintain the owner's beauty, not just in life, but forever in the afterlife. You see, the Egyptians had this belief that your soul had to recognize your body in order to reunite with it in the afterlife. So, if you didn't maintain your physical appearance perfectly, your soul might get lost for eternity. Talk about pressure, right? Imagine if every time you skipped your... She found evidence that wealthy Egyptians were actually tattooing themselves with semi-permanent cosmetic designs, essentially ancient permanent makeup, so they'd never have a bad eternity day. The dedication is honestly both admirable and terrifying. As we wrap up tonight's first chapter, I want you to think about this. Every morning when you look in the mirror, you're participating in a ritual that's thousands of years old. That moment of checking your reflection, adjusting your appearance, maybe putting on a little makeup or cologne. You're connecting with ancient souls who stood before polished copper mirrors along the Nile, preparing not just for their day, but for eternity itself. The ancient Egyptians understood something profound. It's not really about vanity at all. It's about transformation, about becoming the best version of yourself, about respecting the divine spark within you. They just took it to levels that would make modern beauty gurus weep with envy or terror. But we've only just scratched the surface of this incredible story, because tomorrow, well, actually in just a moment, we're going to dive into the most scandalous beauty secret in all of human history. We're going to uncover the real truth about Cleopatra. And trust me, everything you think you know about history's most beautiful woman is about to be turned completely upside down. The evidence will shock you, the revelations will surprise you, and the love story, oh, the love story will break. So stay with me as we turn the page to the next chapter of our ancient Egyptian beauty journey, because Cleopatra's secret is waiting, and it's far more incredible than any movie has ever dared to show you. Now let me ask you something that might keep you awake tonight. What if everything Hollywood ever told you about the most famous, beautiful woman in history was completely wrong? What if Cleopatra VII, the woman who supposedly launched 1,000 ships with her beauty, actually looked nothing like Elizabeth Taylor or Gallardo? And what if her real secret to captivating the most powerful men in the world had absolutely nothing to do with her physical appearance? One that fooled the entire world for over 2,000 years. Here's the thing that will blow your mind right off the bat. We actually have coins, real authentic coins from Cleopatra's reign, minted during her lifetime. The British Museum houses several of these. And when Dr. Solange Ashton, a senior curator of Egyptian antiquities, first studied them under high-resolution microscopy in 2007, her findings were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly what you'd expect from the most beautiful woman who ever lived. The coins show a woman with a prominent hooked nose, a protruding chin, and what historians delicately call masculine features. Professor... Ouch. Right. But here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating. Because you see, Cleopatra understood something that modern influencers are just beginning to figure out. True magnetism isn't about perfect features. It's about perfect strategy. And oh my goodness, did this woman have strategy. Let me paint you the real picture of who Cleopatra was. First off, she wasn't even Egyptian. She was Macedonian Greek, descended from Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy. The Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt for 300 years by the time she was born. And here's a fun fact that'll make you uncomfortable. They kept... Yikes. But here's what made her extraordinary. She was the first ruler in 300 years to actually learn Egyptian. According to the ancient historian Plutarch, she spoke 9 languages fluently. 9. While her predecessors sat in their Greek palaces, completely disconnected from their subjects, Cleopatra walked among the people speaking their language literally and figuratively. Dr. Joyce Tildesley, Egyptologist at the University of Manchester, discovered through her research that Cleopatra's real beauty secret wasn't makeup or fashion. It was intelligence weaponized through theater. Every single public appearance was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to demonstrate. Well, according to Plutarch's Parallel Lives, it wasn't a carpet. It was a linen sack. And she wasn't trying to seduce him with her physical beauty. She was demonstrating her resourcefulness, her courage, and her absolute fearlessness. Imagine here's a 21-year-old woman who just had herself smuggled past enemy guards in a laundry bag to face the most powerful man in the world. That takes guts that most of us can't even imagine. But the real genius move, the moment Caesar unrolled that sack and Cleopatra stepped out, she immediately began speaking to him in perfect Latin. Not Egyptian, not Greek, but his own. She got the position, by the way. Now about her famous beauty routine, because she absolutely had one, just not for the reasons you think. The Roman historian Cassius Dio wrote that Cleopatra bathed in donkey milk infused with honey and almond oil. Sounds luxurious, right? But recent chemical analysis by Dr. Rachel Hajar at the Heartviews Medical Journal reveals something incredible. This combination creates lactic acid and alpha-hydroxy acids, essentially ancient chemical peels. She wasn't just pampering herself. She was using advanced skincare science that wouldn't be rediscovered until the 20th century. And that famous pearl dissolved in vinegar that she supposedly drank. It was a demonstration of chemical knowledge. Cleopatra knew that calcium carbonate, pearl, plus acetic acid, vinegar, would create a drinkable calcium supplement. She was literally showing off her understanding of chemistry while simultaneously proving she had unlimited resources. Talk about a power move. Here's something that Hollywood completely missed. Cleopatra's most seductive feature wasn't her face or her body. It was her voice. Ancient sources are unanimous about this. Plutarch wrote that her voice was like a many-stringed instrument. She had trained with the best rhetoric teachers in Alexandria, and she used her voice like a master musician uses a violin. Dr. Pat Brown from Stanford University. But let's talk about her relationship with Mark Antony, because this is where things get really juicy. You know that famous scene where she arrives dressed as Venus on a golden barge? That actually happened. But here's what the movies don't tell you. It was psychological warfare disguised as romance. According to Dr. Diana Preston's research in Cleopatra and Antony, that golden barge entrance was specifically designed to remind Antony and everyone watching that Egypt was fabulously wealthy while Rome was financially struggling from decades of civil war. The purple sails, the silver oars, the perfumed wind that could be smelled from shore. It was all calculated to demonstrate that Egypt had resources Rome desperately. Dr. Adrian Goldsworthy points out that this was perhaps the most expensive seduction in history and the most strategically brilliant. But here's the heartbreaking part of Cleopatra's story that really gets to me. She genuinely loved both Caesar and Antony. The letters between Cleopatra and Antony, discovered in the Oxy Incas Papyri collection, reveal a woman who was desperately trying to balance her heart with her duty to Egypt. In one fragment she writes, "My beloved, I dream of a world where love doesn't require armies to defend it. You have to understand, this woman was carrying the weight of a 3,000-year-old civilization on her shoulders. She knew she was the last pharaoh, the final link in a chain. The pressure must have been unimaginable. Dr. Stacy Schiff, in her Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, calculated that Cleopatra successfully maintained Egyptian independence for 22 years against Roman expansion, longer than any other Mediterranean power. That's not beauty. That's political genius of the highest order. And when the end came, even her suicide was strategic. She chose the asp, the sacred cobra, because it was the symbol of pharaonic power. Even in death, she was making a statement. I am still the pharaoh of Egypt. According to the ancient historian Dionysius, her final words were in Egyptian, not Greek or Latin. It's like calling Einstein that guy who had weird hair. But maybe that's fitting in a way, because Cleopatra's greatest beauty secret, the one that made her more magnetic than any supermodel, was that she refused to be just beautiful. She insisted on being brilliant, fearless, and unforgettable. So tonight, when you're doing your own beauty routine, remember Cleopatra's real lesson. The most attractive thing about any person isn't their perfect features. It's their refusal to be ordinary. Speaking of refusing to be ordinary, what we're about to discover next will make Cleopatra's story look tame, because we're diving into something truly shocking. The lengths that ordinary is. Get ready to learn about kohl curses and the deadly price of perfect eyes, because what's coming next will change how you think about makeup forever. Imagine putting on your eyeliner this morning and literally signing your own death warrant. Sounds dramatic, right? Well, buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the most chilling beauty stories in human history, where the pursuit of perfect eyes came with a price that would make modern makeup artists quit their jobs immediately. What I'm about to tell you isn't just ancient history. It's a cautionary tale that connects directly to beauty scandals happening right now. Have you ever wondered why your mascara comes with those tiny warning labels? Well, let's step into the sandals of Anchor Cinnamon. Yes, that's a real name. And yes, I practiced saying it about 50 times. She was a middle-class woman living in Memphis around 2000 BCE, and like every Egyptian woman of her time, she began her day by carefully applying kohl around her eyes. This wasn't just makeup. It was spiritual armor, social status, and fashion statement, all rolled into one dramatic black line. But here's where our story takes a dark turn. Dr. Philippe Walter from the Louvre Museum's research laboratory made a discovery in 2010 that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. When his team analyzed residue from over 400 ancient Egyptian kohl, 85% contained lead sulfide concentrations that were literally off the charts. We're talking about lead levels that were 10,000 times higher than what's considered safe today. To put this in perspective, the FDA's current limit for leading cosmetics is 20 parts per million. Ancient Egyptian kohl contained up to 200,000 parts per million. That's not makeup. That's poison applied directly to one of the most sensitive areas of your body, twice daily, for your entire life. Dr. Christian Amaturel from the École Normale Supérieure in Paris conducted groundbreaking research that revealed the horrifying truth. A typical Egyptian woman absorbed. But here's the truly heartbreaking part. They knew something was wrong. Papyrus medical texts from the Edwin Smith collection describe a mysterious eye sickness that primarily affected wealthy women who could afford the finest kohl. The symptoms described: trembling hands, weakness of limb, darkness of thought, are textbook signs of lid poisoning. Yet they continued using it because the social pressure was too intense to resist. Let me tell you about Meritar, whose mummy was discovered in the Valley of the Queens in 1904. When researchers from Johns Hopkins University analyzed her remains in 2003, they found lead concentrations in her bones that were 200 times higher. She literally died for beauty and was buried with the very poison that killed her. Now you might be thinking, surely they had some alternatives, right? Well, Dr. Joanne Fletcher's research at the University of York uncovered something fascinating and tragic. The Egyptians did have safer alternatives. Charcoal mixed with the animal fat created a similar dark effect with zero toxicity. But there was a problem. It was considered peasant makeup. The lead-based kohl had this incredible metallic shimmer that caught the light beautifully, making eyes appear almost supernatural. The safe stuff just looked ordinary. So essentially, ancient Egyptian women faced the same choice modern women face with cosmetic procedures. The difference was that their everything was literally everything. But the psychological aspect of this story is what really gets me. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University discovered that Egyptian women who stopped using kohl faced social ostracism so severe that many preferred death to public shame. There are documented cases of women being divorced, losing their children, and even being accused of witchcraft simply for appearing in public without properly lined eyes. The pressure was so intense that mothers would start applying kohl to their daughters as young as 3 years old. Can you imagine? Toddlers barely old enough to walk were already being slowly poisoned in the name of beauty. The Cairo It's one of the most disturbing exhibits I've ever researched. And here's something that'll give you chills. Wealthy families would hire kohl tasters. These were usually slaves whose job was to test new batches of kohl by applying it first and waiting to see if they developed symptoms. If they lived through the testing period, usually about a month, the kohl was declared safe for the family to use. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol estimates that over 10,000 people died serving as human kohl testers during the New Kingdom period alone. But the story gets even more sinister. The most expensive... It also created madness, blindness, and death, with terrifying efficiency. Queen Nefertiti's mummy has never been definitively identified, but chemical analysis of cosmetic residue found in her tomb suggests she was using kohl that was nearly 60% pure lead. When you look at those famous busts of Nefertiti with those incredibly dramatic eyes, you're not just seeing ancient beauty standards. You're seeing the visual evidence of slow-motion suicide. The British Museum's Dr. Margaret Serpico made another chilling discovery. Egyptian kohl manufacturers would sometimes add crushed pearls or gold dust to their most expensive products. They were literally paying extra to poison themselves faster. And here's where it gets personal. Have you ever heard the phrase "beauty is pain"? That comes directly from ancient Egypt. Dr. Edmund Meltzer's translation of the Hearst Papyrus includes this haunting line: "She who would be beautiful must accept the gift of suffering." They literally codified the idea that beauty requires sacrifice, and that philosophy has echoed through every generation since. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of this story is how preventable it all was. Archaeological evidence shows that by 1500 BCE, Egyptian physicians had identified the connection between kohl use and illness. The Ebus Papyrus contains deep... Sound familiar? It should. From radium-based face creams in the 1920s to formaldehyde-based hair straighteners today, the beauty industry's willingness to prioritize profit over safety has remained remarkably consistent across millennia. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the German Archaeological Institute calculated that during the height of Egyptian civilization, kohl-related deaths accounted for approximately 15% of female mortality among the upper classes. 15%. That means if you were a wealthy Egyptian woman, you had roughly a 1 in 7 chance of being literally killed by your makeup routine. But here's the twist that makes this story even more complex. So, these women weren't completely wrong. Their makeup was providing some legitimate benefits. They just didn't realize they were trading short-term protection for long-term death. The irony is almost too much to bear. They called kohl uju, which means that which protects. They believed it was literally saving their lives when in reality it was ending them. The ancient Egyptians created the world's first beauty myth, that suffering for aesthetics was not only acceptable, but noble. And you know what the most heartbreaking part is? When archaeologists analyze Egyptian mummies from this period, the women who died from kohl poisoning still have traces of it perfectly applied around their eye sockets. That level of dedication to beauty standards, that willingness to die rather than appear imperfect, it's simultaneously admirable and absolutely terrifying. And it makes you wonder, what are we doing right now in our own beauty routines that future archaeologists will look back on in horror? As we move deeper into this incredible journey through ancient beauty obsessions, we're about to discover that kohl wasn't the only way Egyptians risked their lives for perfection. Next, we're diving into their golden skin obsession. And trust me, when you learn what they were willing to do to achieve that perfect tan, you'll never look at a tanning bed the same way again. Think again. What if I told you that 4,000 years before Instagram filters and spray tans, ancient Egyptians had perfected a beauty technique so dangerous that it literally turned people into gold and then killed them? And what if the perfect sun-kissed glow that everyone's chasing today actually originated from a practice so extreme that modern dermatologists would have heart attacks just thinking about it? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're standing on the banks of the Nile at dawn, watching as dozens of wealthy Egyptian women deliberately expose themselves to the desert sun for hours, covered head to toe in what can only be described as liquid gold. Here's something that'll completely blow your mind. The ancient Egyptians didn't want a tan. They wanted to literally become golden. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum of Art made a stunning discovery in 2018 when she analyzed pigment samples from New Kingdom tomb paintings. What she found wasn't just artistic license. It was documentary evidence of a beauty practice so extreme it sounds like science fiction. The Egyptians believed that the gods had golden skin because they were made of the same divine substance as the sun. So naturally, if you wanted to be closer to the gods, you needed golden skin too. Yes, you heard that right. They were literally applying radioactive materials to their skin in pursuit of the perfect golden glow. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the Max Planck Institute analyzed mummy remains from the Valley of the Kings and found something that still gives me chills. Wealthy women from the New Kingdom period had gold particles embedded so deeply in their skin tissue that they were still visible 3,000 years later, but more disturbing. Many of these same mummies showed clear signs of radiation poisoning, brittle bones, organ damage, and cellular mutations that could only come from prolonged exposure to radioactive materials. Let me tell you about Kia, one of Akhenaten's. Beautiful, right? Not so much when you learn that her bones were so brittle from radiation damage that they crumbled when exposed to air. She had literally sacrificed her skeletal system for eternal golden skin. But the most shocking part, they had a whole industry built around this obsession. According to papyrus business records discovered at Deir el-Medina by Dr. Andrea McDowell from the University of Oxford, there were entire guilds of golden skin preparers who charged what would be equivalent to $15,000 in today's money for a single full-body treatment. The process was absolutely insane. First, clients would fast for 3 days to purify their essence, which then they'd be covered in a mixture that included real gold leaf, powdered malachite, crushed pearls, crocodile fat, and here's the kicker, ground-up meteorite fragments. Dr. Patrick McGovern from the University of Pennsylvania analyzed residue from golden skin preparation tools and confirmed that meteorites were indeed a key ingredient. Why meteorites? Because the Egyptians believed they were gifts from the sun god Re, making them the perfect conduit for divine golden energy. In reality, most meteorites contain trace amounts of uranium and other radioactive elements, so these women were literally paying to be painted with space radiation. The British Museum Dr. Sally Ann Ashton's analysis revealed that these mirrors have measurable radiation signatures even today, 3,000 years later. Think about that for a moment. The tools they use to apply this treatment are still radioactive after 3 millennia. But here's where the story gets really heartbreaking. The Wilbur Papyrus, translated by Dr. Richard Jasnow from Johns Hopkins University, contains what appears to be the world's first documented case of radiation sickness. It describes a wealthy woman named Tawi who underwent golden skin treatments and then suffered from the wasting disease, hair loss, nausea, weakness, and eventually they thought the sickness was a sign that the gods were calling these women home because they had become too divine for earthly existence. So instead of stopping the treatments, they saw illness as proof that the process was working. Dr. Zari Hawaz uncovered evidence of something even more disturbing during his excavations at Saqqara. He found the remains of what appears to be a golden skin factory, a facility where dozens of women lived permanently while undergoing continuous golden skin treatments. The building's walls still register radiation levels that would require hazmat suits to explore safely today. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from Dr. Joan Fletcher's work on Nefertiti's possible mummy. While the identification CT scans reveal bone density so low that she likely couldn't walk without assistance in her final years, yet her skin tissue still contains enough gold particles to catch light under laboratory conditions. The economic impact of this obsession was staggering. According to calculations by economic historian Dr. Morris Silver from City College of New York, the golden skin industry consumed approximately 40% of Egypt's gold production during the New Kingdom period. That's gold that could have been used for trade, military equipment, or infrastructure. Instead, wealthy women were literally wearing it on their skin until it killed them. And here's something that will make you rethink modern beauty standards. The Egyptians had different shades of golden skin. The Papyrus Harris, housed at the British Museum, lists over 30 different divine golden formulations, ranging from morning sun gold to desert storm gold. Each required different combinations of radioactive materials, meaning some were more lethal than others. The application process took an entire day and required a team of specialists. According to tomb paintings at Deir el-Bahari, a full golden skin treatment involved 7 different people: the mixer, the applicator, the buffer, the detail artist, the inspector, the prayer reciter, and I kid you not, the death watcher, whose job was to monitor the client for signs of immediate poisoning. Dr. Christian Amaturua from École Normale Supérieure calculated that to put that in perspective, it was equivalent to getting 100 chest X-rays while standing next to a nuclear reactor. And wealthy Egyptian women did this monthly. But here's the most mind-bending part. It actually worked. Visually speaking, tomb paintings show women with skin that appears to literally glow from within. Archaeological evidence suggests that the combination of gold particles and radioactive materials created a bioluminescent effect. Their skin actually emitted light. They had turned themselves into human fireflies, and it was absolutely stunning to behold. The tragic irony is that they achieved exactly what they wanted. They became golden goddesses who literally glowed with divine. Every single woman who underwent intensive golden skin treatments died within 5 years, according to mummy analysis by Dr. Andreas Schmidt. Yet they kept doing it. Why? Because the alternative, looking ordinary, aging naturally, appearing merely human, was considered a fate worse than death. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University found evidence that women who refused golden skin treatments were often divorced by their husbands and ostracized by society. In ancient Egypt, it was better to be a beautiful corpse than a living commoner. The practice finally began to decline during the late period, not because people realized. In a twisted way, foreign invasion probably saved hundreds of Egyptian women's lives by making their deadly beauty treatment economically impossible. And here's something that connects directly to today. Modern spray tans and bronzing products often contain dihydroxyacetone, DHA, which can cause cellular damage with overuse. We're still in our own small way, risking our health for that perfect golden glow. The ancient Egyptians just took it to the logical extreme. If a little gold makes you beautiful, then a lot of gold makes you divine. So the next time you're at the beach working on your tan, remember Kiatawi and count. They would probably think we're incredibly lucky to have such safe alternatives, and incredibly foolish for not appreciating just how easy we have it. But golden skin was just the beginning of Egyptian beauty extremes. Coming up next, we're going to explore something even more outrageous, an obsession that consumed fortunes, started wars, and created wigs so elaborate they required their own servants to maintain. Get ready to discover why some ancient Egyptian hairstyles cost more than modern houses, and how a single bad hair day could literally destroy your social standing forever. Here's a question that might keep you up tonight. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where hair wasn't just about fashion. It was about survival, divinity, and social warfare at the highest levels. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never complain about a $200 salon visit again. Picture this. It's dawn in ancient Thebes, and a wealthy Egyptian woman named Neferet is preparing for the most important day of her life, her daughter's wedding. But she's not worried about flowers or food. She's terrified because her most expensive wig, the one that cost her family the equivalent of a modern Lamborghini, has just been stolen. Without it, she can't appear in public. Without it, the wedding will be called off. This isn't fiction. It's based on actual court records discovered by Dr. Andrea McDowell at Deir Medina. Hair theft was such a serious crime in ancient Egypt that it carried the same penalty as stealing cattle or grain. We're talking about people's wigs being worth more than their homes. Dr. Joanne Fletcher from the University of York made a discovery that revolutionized our understanding of Egyptian hair culture. When she analyzed over 2,000 mummies from various periods, she found something shocking. Nearly 90% of wealthy Egyptians were completely bald under their elaborate wigs. Not naturally bald, deliberately bald. They were according to the Ebers Papyrus, natural hair was considered spiritually impure because it grew from the body, which was associated with decay and death. Wigs, on the other hand, were made from carefully selected hair that had been blessed, purified, and infused with divine essences. Wearing a wig wasn't just fashion. It was literally wearing the god's approval on your head. But here's where things get absolutely wild. The most expensive wigs weren't made from human hair at all. The Metropolitan Museum of Art houses several examples of what Dr. Melinda Hartwig calls divine hair. Wigs made from the manes of sacred lions. Yes, lions. Wealthy Egyptians were. The process of creating these lion mane wigs was absolutely insane. According to tomb paintings at Saqqara, it required a specialized team that included a lion hunter, a hair preparer, a colorist, a stylist, and I'm not kidding, a main blessing priest whose only job was to pray over each individual strand to ensure divine approval. Dr. Salma Ikram from the American University in Cairo analyzed the chemical composition of these ancient wigs and discovered something that would make modern hairstylists weep with envy. They were using techniques we've only recently rediscovered. The hair was treated with a combination of beeswax, tree resins, and something called And speaking of elaborate styles, let me paint you a picture of what wealthy Egyptian women were walking around with on their heads. We're talking about hair sculptures that stood up to 3 feet tall, incorporated real gold threads, featured moving parts powered by hidden counterweights, and in some cases contained actual live birds in tiny cages woven into the structure. Yes, you read that correctly. Lee birds. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol discovered tomb paintings showing women with wigs that included divine messengers, small colourful birds that would chirp and move around within the hair structure. The idea was that these birds could carry prey. The British Museum houses what might be the most expensive hairstyle in human history. A wig belonging to Queen Ti that contained over 200 individual elements, including gold threads, precious stones, carved ivory ornaments, and what appears to be genuine phoenix feathers. When Dr. Joyce Tildersley from the University of Manchester calculated its modern value, she estimated it would cost approximately £28 million to recreate today. But the social pressure around these elaborate wigs was absolutely crushing. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University translated papyrus letters between Egyptian women that reveal a level of hair anxiety. Please send word of any new styles you have witnessed, so that I might not appear provincial when I next venture forth. The competition was so intense that wealthy families would employ full-time wig spies whose job was to infiltrate rival households and report back on upcoming hair innovations. The Cairo Museum has records of what Dr. Mark Lehner calls hair espionage, detailed intelligence reports about competing families' wig collections, including sketches, material lists, and even attempts to bribe wig makers for trade secrets. And the maintenance costs were absolutely staggering. A single elaborate wig required a team of 3 full-time specialists. Dr. David Silverman from the University of Pennsylvania calculated that maintaining a high-status wig collection consumed about 30% of a wealthy family's annual income. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Wig addiction was a real thing. The Edwin Smith papyrus describes a condition called crown madness. Women who became so obsessed with elaborate hairstyles that they would spend entire days arranging and rearranging their wigs, refusing to eat, sleep, or interact with family members. Some women reportedly died from dehydration because they wouldn't interrupt their styling sessions to drink water. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the German Archaeological Institute made a discovery that still gives me chills. Chemical analysis revealed that she had died from lead poisoning, not from cosmetics, but from the lead-based dyes used to color her wig collection. She had literally been killed by her hair accessories. The most tragic case I've encountered in my research involves a woman whose mummy is displayed at the Reichsmuseum Museum in Leiden. Dr. Lara Weiss's analysis revealed that this woman had undergone experimental scalp surgery to create permanent anchor points for increasingly heavy wigs. The procedure went wrong, causing a massive infection that led to her death. She died trying to surgically modify her skull to better support her hairstyles. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Egyptian wig culture was the incredible innovation it drove. They had mastered chemical straightening, permanent curling, colorless dyeing, and even early forms of hair extensions. Dr. Janet J. Stone from the University of Oxford found evidence that Egyptian wig makers were creating synthetic hair from plant fibers and animal proteins over 3,000 years before modern chemical companies developed similar materials. The social implications were staggering. Your wig literally determined your place in society. The Wilbur Papyrus contains detailed regulations about who could wear which types of hair arrangements. Servants could only wear simple single-color wigs. Merchants could add modest decorations. There were spring collections featuring lighter colors and floral motifs, summer styles designed to stay cool in the heat, and ceremonial arrangements reserved for religious festivals. The pressure to keep up with these changing trends bankrupted families. Court records from the reign of Ramses II describe numerous cases of families selling land, livestock, and even children into slavery to afford the latest wig styles. Dr. Maurice Silver's economic analysis suggests that wig-related debt was one of the leading causes of household financial collapse during the New Kingdom period. But the absolute pinnacle of Egyptian wig madness was something called the Divine Transformation, a ceremony. The tomb of Seti-Esches contains detailed instructions for this ritual, which required over 50 people working in perfect coordination to remove one elaborate wig and replace it with another in less than 10 minutes, all while the pharaoh remained standing and speaking to the crowd. Think about the logistics. You're dealing with hair sculptures weighing up to 40, decorated with precious metals and live animals, and you have to swap them out seamlessly in front of thousands of people without missing a beat in your royal speech. It was like a combination of Formula One pit stop and seared shoal performance, except the stakes were maintaining divine authority over an Dr. Horace Seruzian from the German Archaeological Institute found evidence that the most sophisticated royal wigs were essentially wearable architecture featuring internal support structures made from lightweight and metal frameworks. And you know what's really amazing? Some of these techniques are just now being rediscovered by modern hairstylists and fashion designers. The modular wig systems, the chemical treatments, the structural engineering. Ancient Egyptian wig makers were literally centuries ahead of their time. As we prepare to dive even deeper into the sensory world of ancient Egyptian beauty, imagine walking through the street. What would you do if I told you that a single bottle of perfume once caused a war between two of the world's greatest civilizations? Or that ancient Egyptian perfumers were creating fragrances so powerful they could allegedly control people's minds, seduce enemies, and even communicate with the dead? Tonight, we're diving into the intoxicating world of ancient Egyptian perfume, where scent wasn't just about smelling nice, but about wielding invisible power that could topple kingdoms and change the course of history. Let me take you back to 1323 BCE, to the court of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. In his tomb, Howard Carter discovered something. But here's the kicker. When Dr. Barbara Adams from the Petrie Museum analyzed the contents in 1994, she found that many of these perfumes were still potent after 3,000 years. We're talking about fragrances that have outlasted entire civilizations. But Tut's collection pales in comparison to what Dr. Zahi Hawass discovered at Deir el-Bahari in 2006. Hidden beneath Queen Hatshepsut's temple, his team found what can only be described as the world's first perfume laboratory, a massive underground complex with over 200 individual scent-making stations, complete with distillation equipment that wouldn't be reinvented. To put that in perspective, this one ancient Egyptian perfume factory had a higher output than most modern boutique fragrance houses. But here's where the story gets really fascinating. Egyptian perfumers weren't just making things that smelled good. They were creating what Dr. Lee Manek from the University of Copenhagen calls psychological weapons. These weren't perfumes, they were mind control devices, disguised as cosmetic. The Edwin Smith Papyrus contains detailed formulas for scents designed to produce specific emotional responses. There's a fragrance called Submission of Ra that was supposedly guaranteed to make anyone who smelled it. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds like ancient marketing hype, right? Well, Dr. Avery Gilbert from the Manel Chemical Senses Center analyzed some of these ancient formulas and found something remarkable. The Egyptians had actually discovered neurologically active compounds, natural chemicals that could genuinely affect mood, memory, and even decision-making. They weren't just making perfume, they were doing early neuroscience. Let me tell you about the most expensive perfume in human history. Tears of the Gods, created specifically for Cleopatra's soup. According to the Incas papyri, this single fragrance required ingredients from 47 different countries. The shopping list reads like an ancient Indiana Jones movie. Frankincense from Dr. Robert Littman from the University of Hawaii calculated that creating 1 ounce of Tears of the Gods required a trade network spanning over $5,000 and cost the equivalent of $2, 3 million in today's money. Cleopatra wore the entire wealth of small nations on her skin, and everyone who met her knew it. But the real genius of Egyptian perfume wasn't just the scents themselves, it was the delivery system. Dr. Joanne Fletcher discovered that wealthy Egyptians were using what she calls time-release technology, thousands of years before modern perfumers figured it out. They would layer different fragrances in specific combinations. Your nose would literally experience a story unfolding over 12 hours. It was like wearing a perfume novel. The most sophisticated of these time-release fragrances was called Journey of the Sun, and it was designed to mirror Ra's daily passage across the sky. Dr. Barbara Adams analyzed residue from containers of this perfume and found evidence of 7 distinct scent phases, each one triggered by specific temperature ranges that corresponded to different times of day. The Egyptian perfumers had essentially created wearable sundials made of scent. But here's where things get really wild. The Egyptians believed that different perfumes could help you communicate with specific gods. The papyrus Harris. Want to pray to the wisdom? You needed scribes blessing perfume, planning to ask Hathor for love. Better wear dancers' delight. This wasn't just religious superstition. It was strategic spiritual networking. Dr. Geraldine Pinch from Oxford University found evidence that Egyptian priests would actually refuse to accept offerings from people who weren't wearing the appropriate divine fragrance. Your perfume choice could literally determine whether your prayers were heard by the gods. The business implications were staggering. The perfume trade made ancient Egypt one of the world's first global economic powers. The Turin Papyrus describes what Dr. Richard Yasnow calls the first industrial espionage, when rival perfume houses would literally kidnap each other's master perfumers to steal trade secrets. There are documented cases of perfume formulators being held hostage for months, while their captors tortured them for recipes. The most famous case involved a perfumer named Katie who created a fragrance called Memory of Paradise that was so extraordinary 3 different royal houses simultaneously tried to kidnap him. The poor guy spent 2 years being passed back and forth between various palaces like a very aromatic hostage. His perfume was apparently so incredible that people would literally commit international crimes just. He found evidence that she was wearing a perfume that contained compounds we now recognize as natural antidepressants and anxiolytics. Essentially, she was wearing pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizers disguised as luxury fragrance. No wonder she always looked so serene in those famous sculptures. The Egyptians had also figured out scent marketing 4,000 years before modern advertisers caught on. Dr. Selma Ikram found evidence that Egyptian temples would release specific fragrances during religious ceremonies to put worshippers in the right psychological state for maximum donation. Different scents were used for different types of appeals. A fragrance so complex that it required a dedicated team of 12 specialists working for 6 months to create a single batch. Dr. Joyce Tilsley's analysis revealed that this perfume contained over 200 individual ingredients, many of which had to be harvested at specific times of day during particular phases of the moon. The formula for royal presence was so closely guarded that it was written in a secret script that took modern scholars 40 years to decode. When they finally cracked it, they discovered something incredible. The perfume was designed to create a unique scent signature that would linger in rooms for days after the wearer had left. Ancient Egyptian pharaohs. And here's something that connects directly to modern perfume science. The Egyptians had discovered that certain scent combinations could trigger specific memories. Dr. Rachel Hertz from Brown University found that some Egyptian perfume formulas were specifically designed to make people remember positive experiences with the wearer. They were essentially creating olfactory brainwashing, making themselves literally unforgettable through strategic scent selection. The social pressure around perfume was just as intense as everything else we've discussed. Egyptian women were expected to wear different fragrances for different social situations, and getting it wrong could be socially devastating. The Wilbur Papyrus contains a heartbreaking. But perhaps the most touching aspect of Egyptian perfume culture was their belief that scents could follow you into the afterlife. Mummies were buried with their entire perfume collections because Egyptians believed that your signature scent was part of your soul's identity. Dr. Selma Ikram found mummies that were still wearing traces of perfume after 3,000 years. They had literally taken their favorite fragrances with them to eternity. The decline of the Egyptian perfume industry came with the Roman conquest, but not because the Romans didn't appreciate good fragrance. Quite the opposite. They loved Egyptian perfume so much that they essentially strip-mined the entire industry, relocating the best perfume earners to Dr. Mandy Aftel, a leading perfumer and fragrance historian, has identified over 30 ingredients and techniques still used in modern luxury perfumes that can be traced directly back to ancient Egyptian formulations. Every time you spray on your favorite fragrance, you're participating in a beauty ritual that stretches back to the pharaohs. As we continue our journey through the extremes of ancient Egyptian beauty culture, we're about to encounter practices that make everything we've discussed so far seem tame by comparison. Because next we're diving into the world of body modification, where Egyptians weren't content to simply enhance their natural appearance, but instead chose to While we debate whether a small nose piercing is too extreme, ancient Egyptians were voluntarily undergoing surgical procedures so radical that modern plastic surgeons would refuse to perform them. They weren't just decorating their bodies, they were rewriting the very definition of what it meant to be human. And the most shocking part, they were doing it all in the name of beauty, spirituality, and eternal perfection. Let me start with something that'll make your skin crawl in the best possible way. Sacred scarification. Dr. Renee Friedman from the British Museum made a discovery in 2018 that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. While examining mummies from But these weren't random cuts or simple tribal markings. These were elaborate artistic masterpieces carved directly into living flesh. The most complex example found on a mummy known as the Scarred Lady of Hercules features over 400 individual incisions arranged in geometric patterns that follow the golden ratio, the same mathematical principle used in the pyramids of Giza. Think about that for a moment. Someone voluntarily allowed surgeons to make 400 precise cuts across their body, arranged according to sacred mathematical principles, all while conscious and without anesthesia. The dedication to beauty is simultaneously inspiring. They weren't just decorative. The scars were strategically placed along acupuncture meridians that wouldn't be mapped by Chinese medicine for another 1,000 years. The ancient Egyptians were performing therapeutic body modification that combined aesthetic enhancement with medical treatment. But scarification was just the beginning. Let me tell you about Egyptian tattooing, because what they were doing makes modern tattoo artists look like amateurs working with crayons. Dr. Ann Austin from the University of Missouri made headlines in 2016 when she discovered the mummy of Hathor, a woman whose body was covered in tattoos so sophisticated The Egyptian tattoo artists were using a process Dr. Austin calls layered pigment injection, where different colored inks were inserted at various skin depths to create a 3D effect. When viewed from different angles, Hathokar's tattoos actually appeared to move and change, creating an animated effect on living skin. It was like having a movie playing on your body 4,000 years before cinema was invented. But here's where it gets really mind-blowing. Chemical analysis revealed that these tattoos contained actual gold and silver particles. Dr. Joanne Fletcher's research showed that wealthy Egyptians were literally having precious metals injected into their skin to create tattoos that would catch and reflect. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the Max Planck Institute calculated that creating one of these elaborate golden tattoos would have required over 40 hours of continuous work spread across multiple sessions. The process involved inserting hot metal needles filled with molten gold into the skin while the patient remained conscious and still. One small movement could ruin weeks of work and leave permanent scarring. Yet wealthy Egyptians were lining up for these procedures. The Wilbur Papyrus contains waiting lists for the most famous tattoo artists that stretched for months. Getting an appointment with a master tattoo artist was like trying to book and things did go wrong. Dr. Salma Ikram from the American University in Cairo found evidence of what she calls tattoo disasters. Cases where the golden ink caused severe allergic reactions, infections, or metal poisoning. The Cairo Museum houses the mummy of a woman who apparently died from gold toxicity caused by her full-body tattoo. Her skin still has a faint golden shimmer 3,000 years later, but the gold particles had accumulated in her organs to lethal concentration. But perhaps the most extreme form of Egyptian body modification was something called divine piercing. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum. Wealthy Egyptians were piercing body parts that most people don't even want to think about. The mummy of Ankh-Sekhmet, discovered at Saqqara, had over 200 individual piercings across her body, including several in locations that would make modern body modification enthusiasts wheezy. But the most shocking discovery was evidence of internal piercing procedures, where jewelry was inserted not just through the skin, but actually embedded within the body cavity. Dr. Zars found mummies with gold ornaments surgically implanted inside their abdomen, apparently as offerings to specific gods. These weren't piercings you could see or touch. They were hidden beneath the skin, known only to the wearer and their gods. Dr. Edwin Brock from the Royal Ontario Museum analysed the tool marks on these internally pierced mummies and concluded that Egyptian surgeons were using instruments and techniques that wouldn't be redeveloped until the 19th century. They were performing laparoscopic surgery 4,000 years before modern medicine figured it out. And then there were the dental modifications. Oh boy, the dental modifications. Dr. Andreas Nerlich from the University of Munich made a discovery that still gives dentists nightmares. Ancient Egyptians were deliberately filing their teeth into elaborate shapes and inlaying them with precious stones and metals. The most extreme example is the mummy of Kaime, whose teeth, his murs had been shaped to resemble tiny pyramids, while his incisors were carved with hieroglyphic inscriptions. Every time he smiled, he was displaying a mouthful of personalized art installations. The process of creating these dental modifications was absolutely brutal. Dr. Joyce Tilsley from the University of Manchester studied ancient Egyptian dental tools and concluded that the procedures were performed using bronze instruments, while patients bit down on leather straps without any form of anesthesia. The filing and carving process could take days, with patients returning multiple times as their mouths healed between sessions. But here's the really wild part. These weren't just cosmetic. They were functional replacement teeth. that allowed people to eat normally while maintaining their elaborate dental aesthetics. The social pressure around body modification was intense. According to the Edwin Smith Papyrus, unmarked bodies were considered spiritually incomplete. People without tattoos, scars, or piercings were often refused entry to certain temples and excluded from important social events. Your body modifications were essentially your spiritual resume. They told the world and the gods exactly who you were and what you'd sacrificed for divine approval. Dr. Renee Friedman found evidence that it was ancient Egypt's version of Instagram filters, but for your actual physical body. The most tragic cases involved people who couldn't afford real modifications trying to create their own. The British Museum houses the mummy of a young woman who apparently attempted to tattoo herself using a thorn and ash mixture. The infection from her DIY tattoo spread throughout her body and killed her within days. She died trying to give herself the social acceptance that expensive body modification provided. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Egyptian body modification was their understanding of the psychological effect. The ancient Egyptians had essentially figured out that by strategically modifying their bodies, they could change their minds. They were performing primitive psychotherapy through controlled trauma using the endorphin rush from extreme piercing and scarification to achieve altered states of consciousness that they interpreted as divine communication. And you know what's really fascinating? Some of their techniques are being rediscovered by modern practitioners. Dr. Fakim Mustafa, often called the father of the modern primitive movement, spent decades studying ancient Egyptian body modification techniques and found that many of them produced genuine psychological and spiritual benefit. The decline of Egyptian body modification culture came with the Roman conquest, but the art form didn't disappear. It was essentially monopolized by foreign conquerors. Today, when we see someone with extensive tattoos or unusual piercings, we're witnessing the continuation of a tradition that stretches back to the pharaohs. Every time someone voluntarily endures pain to modify their appearance, they're connecting with ancient souls who understood that true transformation requires sacrifice. The question is, what would those ancient Egyptian body modification artists think of our modern extreme practices? They'd probably wonder why we're being so conservative. After all, we're still working with the same basic canvas they mastered thousands of years ago. What we're about to discover next will take us behind the scenes of the most exclusive beauty treatments in history, into the private chambers where pharaohs and queens underwent secret procedures that were literally matters of life, death, and divine approval. Get ready to meet the makeup artist to the gods themselves. Ever wondered what it would be like to hold someone's life in your hands every single day? Not a surgeon, not a bodyguard, but a makeup artist whose smallest mistake could mean execution, exile, or worse, disappointing a god-king who believed their divine appearance was the only thing standing between Egypt and cosmic chaos. It was literally a matter of national security. Let me introduce you to Kamwaset, not the prince, but a man whose name appears on a small ostracon discovered by Dr. Andrea McDowell at DRL Medina. This limestone fragment, no bigger than your palm, contains what might be the world's first makeup artist's diary. And what it reveals about the secret world of royal beauty treatments will make modern celebrity glam squads look like amateurs playing dress-up. According to Dr. McDowell's translation, Kamwaset served as first beautifier to the living god during the reign of Seti F. His job description, carved in hieroglyphs on a tomb wall at Saqqara. But the reality of his daily routine was far more terrifying than poetic. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol analysed royal beauty protocols documented in the Chester Bay Papyri and discovered that royal makeup artists worked under conditions that would make modern special forces training look relaxing. First, they had to wake up at 300 a.m. not to get an early start, but because they needed 4 hours to purify themselves before they were allowed to touch the pharaoh's face. This purification ritual, described in detail by Dr. Geraldine Pinch from Oxford University, involved ritual bathing in sacred pools. Think about that level of pressure. You're not just doing someone's makeup, you're performing a religious ceremony where the slightest contamination could allegedly anger the gods and bring plague, famine, or military defeat to an entire civilization. No pressure, right? The tools alone were worth more than most people's houses. Dr. Melinda Hartwig's analysis of royal cosmetic implements at the Metropolitan Museum revealed makeup brushes made from the fur of sacred cats, applicators carved from elephant ivory, and mixing palettes crafted from solid gold. But the most valuable tool wasn't made of precious materials. It was knowledge. Royal makeup artist Dr. Barbara Adams from the Petrie Museum found evidence that these formulas were so closely guarded that they were never written down completely. Master makeup artists would pass knowledge to their apprentices through a complex system of code words, hand signals, and ritual demonstrations that took decades to master fully. And the consequences of getting it wrong were absolutely terrifying. The Judicial Papyrus of Turin, analyzed by Dr. Anthony Spinger from the University of Oakland, describes the trial of a royal makeup artist who was executed for using the wrong shade of kohl on Pharaoh Ramesses III during a religious ceremony. The court records state that his era of divine beautification was Kemet's tomb, excavated by Dr. Melinda Hartwig, reveals that he owned 3 houses, had servants of his own, and was buried with cosmetic tools that would be worth millions of dollars today. The inscription on his sarcophagus reads, "He who made gods beautiful in life, may he be beautiful in death for all eternity." The daily routine of preparing a pharaoh was mind-bogglingly complex. According to the Papyrus Brooklyn 47 218-50, translated by Dr. Richard Justnow from Johns Hopkins University, a complete royal beauty treatment involved 47 separate steps and took an average of 6 hours to complete. 6 hours. Modern red carpet looks take maybe 2. It was about magical transformation. Dr. Geraldine Pinch's research revealed that each step of the royal beauty process was believed to activate different aspects of divine power. The kohl wasn't just eyeliner. It was spiritual armor. The rouge wasn't just blush. It was the glow of divine favor. The perfume wasn't just fragrance. It was the actual presence of the gods made manifest in scent. The most closely guarded secret was something called the transformation of Ra, a special makeup technique used only for the most important religious ceremonies. Dr. Joan Fletcher found references to this procedure in royal tomb inscriptions. The process was absolutely insane. It involved applying 7 different layers of makeup, each one activated by specific incantations and breathing techniques. The final result was supposed to make the pharaoh's face literally glow with divine light, and apparently it actually worked. Chemical analysis by Dr. Christian Amuro revealed that the cosmetics contained phosphorescent compounds that would create a genuine luminescent effect in torchlight. But the psychological pressure on royal makeup artists was perhaps the most challenging aspect of the job. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University found evidence that these artists lived in constant fear of divine retribution. They were required to The apprenticeship process was brutal. According to the Wilbur Papyrus, future royal makeup artists began training at age 7 and didn't graduate to full practitioner status until their 30s. The training involved memorizing thousands of formulas, practicing application techniques on practice heads made from wax, and learning to work blindfolded so they could apply makeup in darkened temple chambers. Dr. Daniel Antoine from the British Museum discovered something both touching and terrifying in his analysis of royal makeup artist mummies. Many showed evidence of severe arthritis in their hands and chronic back problems from bending over pharaohs for hours at a time. They literally sacrificed their physical health. This underground facility contained over 1,000 different cosmetic preparations, detailed notes on color mixing, and what can only be described as the world's first makeup testing facility. The most incredible find was a series of painted wooden heads that have been used to test different makeup combinations. These practice faces dating to the reign of Akhenaten show hundreds of different cosmetic experiments. Some are beautiful, some are bizarre, and a few are genuinely disturbing. Evidence of a master artist pushing the boundaries of what was possible with ancient beauty technology. Dr. Joyce Tildesley's analysis revealed that royal makeup artists were the most touching aspect of this story is the genuine artistry and dedication these individuals brought to their work. Despite the terrifying pressure and life or death stakes, they created beauty that has inspired artists for millennia. When you look at those incredible tomb paintings of pharaohs with perfect makeup, you're not just seeing ancient art, you're seeing the work of master beauticians who treated every royal face as a canvas for divine transformation. The tradition finally ended with the Roman conquest, but not because the Romans didn't appreciate skilled makeup artistry. Quite the opposite. They were so impressed that they kidnapped the best Egyptian makeup artists and forced them to work exclusively. Yet, the influence of these royal makeup artists echoes through every modern beauty trend. Every time a makeup artist spends hours perfecting a look for a celebrity or public figure, they're continuing a tradition that stretches back to the pharaohs. Every time someone uses makeup to transform their appearance for a special occasion, they're participating in the ancient Egyptian belief that beauty has the power to elevate mortals toward the divine. The real tragedy is that we've forgotten the spiritual dimension that made their work so meaningful. Modern makeup is often about hiding flaws or following trends. Ancient Egyptian royal makeup was about becoming the best possible version of yourself, literally achieving a form of temporary godhood. But we're far from finished with the mysteries of Egyptian beauty culture. What we're about to explore next will take us into the most morbid and fascinating aspect of their obsession with eternal perfection. We're going beyond the realm of the living, into the preparation chambers, where beauty continued even after death. Because in ancient Egypt, looking good for eternity was just as important as looking good in life. Death, as they say, is the great equalizer. Except in ancient Egypt, where dying was just the beginning of your most important beauty routine. What if I told you that the mummification process wasn't— Prepare yourself for the most macabre beauty story you've ever heard, where death wasn't the end of vanity. It was its ultimate expression. When Howard Carter first opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he made a discovery that modern forensic scientists are still trying to understand. Beneath all those famous golden burial masks and elaborate wrappings, King Tut had been given what can only be described as ancient Egypt's first extreme makeover. And I mean extreme. Dr. Zahi Hawas's 2005 CT scan analysis revealed something that shocked the archaeological world. Tutankhamun's mummy had been— The embalmers had completely rebuilt Tut's face, reshaped his torso, and even given him artificial body parts made from precious material. His heart, which had been damaged during his death, was replaced with a scarab beetle carved from solid gold. His missing ribs were replaced with wooden replicas wrapped in golden wire. They had literally turned his corpse into a work of art. But Tut's makeover was nothing compared to what Dr. Joanne Fletcher discovered when she analyzed the mummy of Hatshepsut, Egypt's most powerful female pharaoh. Using advanced imaging technology, Dr. Fletcher found that Hatshepsut's embalmer had performed what amounts to ancient gender reassignment surgery on her corpse. You see, pharaohs— It was considered essential for divine transformation. So Hatshepsut's embalmers had actually reconstructed her body to appear more masculine. adding artificial muscle mass, reshaping her face to look more angular, and even attaching a false beard made from human hair and resin. They had posthumously transformed her from a woman into the male pharaoh she had portrayed in life. Dr. Selma Ikram from the American University in Cairo made an even more disturbing discovery when she analyzed mummies from the Middle Kingdom period. She found evidence that wealthy Egyptians were actually planning their post-mortem makeovers while they were still alive, hiring embalmer to design custom enhancement plans. One contract, translated by Dr. Richard Jasnow from Johns Hopkins University, specifies that a wealthy merchant wanted his weak chin strengthened with carved ivory, his thin hair replaced with thick locks from a lion's mane, and his pale complexion enhanced with golden powder mixed into the preservation oils. Think about that level of vanity and forward planning. This man was literally designing his ideal appearance to be implemented after his death. It's like pre-ordering plastic surgery for your corpse. But the most shocking discovery came from Dr. Andreas Nerlich's analysis of royal mummies at the University of Munich. He found evidence that embalmers were performing what he calls beauty autopsies, detailed post-mortem examinations. These weren't medical examinations. They were cosmetic consultations with dead people. Embalmer would catalogue every imperfection, scars, birthmarks, asymmetrical features, signs of aging, and then spend months carefully correcting each one during the preservation process. The techniques they used were absolutely incredible. Dr. Joyce Tilsley from the University of Manchester discovered that royal embalmers had developed a process called divine reconstruction, where they would completely disassemble a body, enhance or replace every single part, and then reassemble it like some kind of ancient Egyptian Frankenstein's monster, but beautiful. They would remove all the organs, treat them separately with different. But the most bizarre aspect was the facial work. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol found evidence that embalmers were performing full facial reconstructions on mummies using techniques that modern plastic surgeons are still trying to understand. They would remove the brain through the nose, not just to prevent decay, but to make room for divine filling that would give the skull a more pleasing shape. Then they would rebuild the entire face from the inside out using a combination of linen, resin, sawdust, and precious materials to create the perfect posthumous appearance. The Metropolitan Museum of Art houses X-rays of royal mummies, showing that their eye sockets were filled with artificial eye. Their lips were plumped with resin injections, and their cheeks were enhanced with pads made from linen and precious oils. They were getting ancient Botox and fillers administered by embalmers. But perhaps the most shocking discovery was made by Dr. Melinda Hartwig when she analyzed the mummy of Ramesses II. Beneath his wrappings, she found evidence that his embalmer had given him a complete body makeover that would make modern cosmetic surgeons weep with envy. They had enhanced his muscle definition using carved wooden inserts, given him a more athletic physique by redistributing his body fat, and even enhanced his masculine attributes using specially crafted additions made from precious materials. The attention to detail was obsessive. Dr. Christian Amura from École Normale Supérieure analyzed the chemical composition of mummy wrappings and found that different parts of the body were treated with different cosmetic preparation. The face received the most expensive treatments, including applications of real gold powder and crushed pearls, while less visible areas got more basic preservation. But here's where the story gets really wild. They were also doing cosmetic dentistry on corpses. Dr. Andreas Nerlich found mummies with artificial teeth made from ivory and gold, dental implants that were installed post-mortem. She literally got a complete dental makeover after death. The psychological aspect of this obsession is what really gets to me. These people were so concerned about their appearance in the afterlife that they were willing to pay fortunes for cosmetic work that they would never actually see or enjoy. It was vanity extended into eternity. the ultimate expression of the belief that beauty was more important than life itself. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University found evidence that some wealthy Egyptians would actually visit embalmers while alive to preview their post-mortem makeovers. They had developed a process using wax models where clients could see exactly how they would look as beautifully enhanced mummies. Can you imagine that consultation? Well, Mrs. Ananka, what do you think? It's simultaneously fascinating and deeply disturbing. The cost of these post-mortem makeovers was absolutely staggering. Dr. David Silverman from the University of Pennsylvania calculated that a full royal mummification with cosmetic enhancements cost the equivalent of $8, $7 million in today's money. That's more expensive than most people's entire lifetime earning potential spent on looking good while dead. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of this story is how it reveals the depth of ancient Egyptian anxiety about physical appearance. These were people so insecure about their looks that they couldn't bear the thought of being imperfect. He found mummies that had been buried with mirrors, presumably so they could check their appearance in the afterlife. They had literally taken their vanity with them to the grave. The tradition finally declined during the Roman period, not because people became less vain, but because Roman burial customs didn't allow for the extensive body modification that Egyptian mummification required. The art of post-mortem beauty enhancement was essentially banned by foreign occupiers who didn't understand its spiritual significance. Yet the psychological drive behind these practices, the desire to present our best possible selves even in death, remains with us today. Modern funeral directors still practice a form of cosmetic enhancement on the deceased, using the difference is that we do it for the comfort of the living, while the ancient Egyptians were doing it for the benefit of the dead themselves. They genuinely believed that looking good in death was essential for happiness in the afterlife. Now, as we continue to explore the darker side of Egyptian beauty culture, we're about to encounter a topic that might hit closer to home than you'd expect. We're diving into the world of ancient body image anxiety, eating disorders, and the psychological pressure that came with living in a civilization where physical perfection wasn't just desired, it was considered a moral obligation. Sometimes the most shocking historical revelations come from the smallest details. What I'm about to share with you might be the most heartbreaking chapter in our journey through ancient Egyptian beauty culture, because it reveals that the pressure to be physically perfect drove people to extremes that would be tragically familiar to anyone struggling with body image today. The ancient Egyptians didn't just have beauty standards. They had beauty commandments that could destroy lives, families, and futures with ruthless efficiency. Dr. Joyce Tilsley from the University of Manchester made a discovery in 2003 that fundamentally changed how we understand ancient Egyptian society. While analyzing papyrus medical texts from the Edwin Smith collection, she found detailed descriptions of what she calls the wasting sickness. Sound familiar? Dr. Tilsley had uncovered evidence of anorexia nervosa in ancient Egypt, documented over 4,000 years ago. The medical papyrus describes young women who would refuse the bread of life, claiming their bodies were too heavy for the gods to lift to the heavens. It details treatment protocols that included force feeding, physical restraint, and what we would now recognize as early forms of psychological counseling. The ancient Egyptians had identified and were treating eating disorders millennia before modern medicine understood they existed. But this wasn't an isolated problem. Dr. Bni Frieridman from the British Museum analyzed over 1,000 mummies from various... These weren't people who couldn't afford food. They were people who chose not to eat because they believed thinness was essential for spiritual purity. The social pressure was absolutely crushing. According to the Wilbur Papyrus, translated by Dr. Richard Jasnow from Johns Hopkins University, there were detailed social guidelines about acceptable body shapes for different classes and ages. Young, unmarried women were expected to maintain what was called the reed figure, so thin that they resemble the papyrus plants growing along the Nile. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University discovered tomb paintings that reveal the extent of this body image obsession. Wealthy families would commission artists to paint idealized portraits of their daughters, showing them But here's the disturbing part. Many young women would then try to make their real bodies match these idealized paintings, leading to dangerous weight loss and health problems. The pressure wasn't just social, it was religious. The pyramid texts, analyzed by Dr. Mark Lehner, contain passages suggesting that overweight souls might be too heavy for the gods to lift into the afterlife. Imagine being told that your eternal salvation depended on maintaining a specific body weight. The psychological impact must have been devastating. Dr. Zahi Hawass found evidence of what he calls beauty competitions at various Egyptian temples, but the most heartbreaking discovery came from Dr. Andreas Nerlich's analysis of mummies at the University of Munich. He found the remains of several young women who had clearly died from starvation-related complications, yet they had been buried with elaborate cosmetics and jewelry, suggesting their families still considered them beautiful even in their extremely emaciated state. One mummy discovered at Deir el-Bahari weighed only 68 lab at the time of death, but was buried with a golden mirror and an inscription that read, "She who perfected herself for the gods." Dr. Salma Ikram's analysis revealed that this woman had slowly starved herself to death over a period of approximately 2 years, all while maintaining an active social life and appearing at religious. The methods these ancient women used to maintain extreme thinness were both ingenious and terrifying. The Abers papyrus contains recipes for what Dr. Barbara Adams calls hunger suppressants, herbal mixtures designed to eliminate appetite. Chemical analysis revealed that these contained compounds that are still used in modern diet pills, but in concentrations that would be considered dangerously high today. Dr. Christian Amatura from École Normale Supérieure found evidence that wealthy Egyptian women were using a plant called desert lily to induce vomiting after meals. They had essentially invented bulimia as a weight control method, complete with elaborate rituals to hide the practice from family members. The psychological impact. These women weren't just starving themselves, they were exercising to dangerous extremes while consuming inadequate nutrition. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect was the way this obsession affected relationships within families. The papyrus Brooklyn contains correspondence between mothers and daughters that reveals the generational transmission of body image anxiety. One letter dated to approximately 1600 BCE contains a mother's advice to her daughter. "Remember that the gods prefer their servants light as feathers. A heavy daughter brings shame to her father's house and reduces her value in the marriage market." Think about receiving that kind of message from your own mother. Dr. Joyce Tilsley found evidence that we're talking about parents deliberately malnourishing their own children in the name of social advancement. The economic pressure made everything worse. Dr. David Silverman from the University of Pennsylvania calculated that maintaining the ideal Reed figure required a lifestyle that consumed approximately 40% of a wealthy family's income. The special foods, exercise equipment, personal trainers, and medical supervision needed to achieve and maintain extreme thinness was incredibly expensive, creating additional stress and family tension. Dr. Andrea McDowell discovered at Deal Medina that there were actually professional body shapers, specialists whose job was. But the most tragic cases involved young women who developed what Dr. Andrea Schmidt calls beauty madness, a psychological condition where the pursuit of physical perfection became so obsessive that it consumed every aspect of their lives. The Cairo Museum houses personal items from one such case. A young woman whose possessions included 47 different measuring devices for checking body dimensions, detailed daily logs of food consumption, and exercise equipment that showed signs of obsessive overuse. Her diary, translated by Dr. Geraldine Pinch from Oxford University, contains entries that are heartbreakingly familiar to anyone who has struggled with body image. I am too heavy for beauty, She eventually died from complications related to severe malnutrition, despite having access to the best medical care available in ancient Egypt. The medical texts also describe what we would now recognize as body dysmorphia. The Edwin Smith Papyrus contains detailed accounts of women who believed they were overweight despite being dangerously underweight, and who would spend hours daily examining their bodies for perceived flaws. Ancient Egyptian doctors had identified and were treating a psychological condition that modern psychiatry didn't officially recognize until the 1980s. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum discovered evidence of early interventions that remarkably parallel modern eating disorder treatment. But the social stigma was enormous. Women who recovered from these conditions were often considered damaged goods in the marriage market. Dr. Gay Robbins found legal documents showing that marriage contracts sometimes included clauses requiring brides to maintain specific body measurements with financial penalties for weight gain. The really heartbreaking part is how this obsession affected normal family relationships. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol found evidence of sisters competing with each other over who could achieve greater thinness, parents favoring thinner daughters over their more robust siblings, and marriage negotiations that were called off because a young woman had gained weight during the courtship period. But perhaps the most significant discovery was made by Dr. Joyce Tilsley when she found evidence that some of these ancient eating disorders were actually passed down through families. Mothers who had struggled with food restriction would unconsciously pass those behaviors to their daughters, creating generational cycles of body image anxiety that could persist for decades. The decline of these extreme practices came gradually with the changing political landscape and foreign influences. Roman beauty standards were somewhat more accepting of diverse body types, and Greek philosophy emphasized balance and moderation rather than extreme aestheticism. Yet the psychological patterns What's both fascinating and sobering is realizing that these struggles with body image and self-acceptance aren't products of modern media or contemporary social pressures. They are fundamental human challenges that have existed as long as people have compared themselves to idealized standards of beauty. But the Egyptian obsession with physical perfection wasn't limited to women alone. As we're about to discover, the beauty pressures facing men in ancient Egypt were equally intense and perhaps even more surprising. We're stepping into a world where Egyptian kings wore more makeup than their queens, where masculine beauty routines would make modern male grooming look like child's play. Here's a question that might what if the ultimate symbol of masculine power in the ancient world spent more time, money, and effort on beauty routines than the most pampered socialite in modern Beverly Hills? Get ready to discover a world where real men wore full faces of makeup, elaborate jewelry, and beauty treatments that would make today's male grooming influencers look absolutely amateur by comparison. When Howard Carter catalogued the contents of Tutankhamun's tomb, he made a discovery that historians quietly downplayed for decades. Among the pharaoh's possessions were over 100 containers of cosmetics, skincare products, and beauty tools, more than were found in most queens' tombs. But here's the kicker. We're not talking about basic grooming here. King Tut owned multiple shades of kohl rouge in 7 different colors, lip stains ranging from subtle to dramatic, and what can only be described as ancient bronzer designed to give his skin a godlike golden glow. Dr. Joanne Fletcher from the University of York calculated that Tut's daily makeup routine would have taken approximately 2.5 hours to complete every single day. but Tut was actually considered low maintenance compared to some of his predecessors. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum analyzed artistic depictions of Ramses II and found evidence that this legendary pharaoh wore makeup so elaborate it required. The Egyptian concept of masculine beauty was radically different from modern Western ideals. According to the pyramid texts analyzed by Dr. Mark Lehner, pharaohs were expected to embody divine perfection, which meant their appearance had to transcend normal human limitations. They weren't just men. They were living gods, and gods needed to look the part. Dr. Zaz discovered at Saqqara what he calls the divine masculinity protocols. Detailed instructions for how pharaohs should enhance their appearance for different religious ceremonies. These weren't simple grooming tips. They were complex beauty procedures that would make modern drag artists weep with envy. For the daily sunrise ceremony, pharaohs wore. The process required 37 different products and took over 3 hours to apply correctly. But the most elaborate was the transformation of Horus makeup used during major religious festivals. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University found detailed descriptions of this process in temple inscriptions. It involved painting the pharaoh's entire face with intricate patterns, using 5 different colors of makeup, applying false eyelashes made from genuine falcon feathers, and creating a divine beard using a combination of real hair and precious metal threads. The psychological pressure on pharaohs to maintain perfect masculine beauty was absolutely crushing. Dr. Joyce Tilden. One particularly fascinating case involves Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who revolutionized Egyptian art and religion. Dr. Barry Kemp's excavations at Tel Amarna revealed that Akhenaten owned the most extensive collection of male cosmetics ever discovered. We're talking about over 300 individual beauty products, including experimental formulations that were apparently created specifically for his unique facial features. But here's where it gets really interesting. Akhenaten's revolutionary artistic style, which showed more realistic and androgynous human figures, might have been partly motivated by his own relationship with beauty standards. Court records from the reign of Seti the Men, translated by Dr. Anthony Spallinger from the University of Oakland, describe what can only be called beauty contests between high-ranking officials. These men would compete to see who could achieve the most impressive makeup application, most elaborate hairstyle, and most stunning jewelry coordination. The stakes were serious. Winners received promotions, land grants, and increased access to the pharaoh. Losers faced social humiliation and could lose their positions at court. Dr. Andrea McDowell found evidence at DRL Medina of court officials hiring professional makeup artists and beauty consultants to help them compete more effectively in these contests. But he found that wealthy Egyptian men were undergoing cosmetic surgery while alive to enhance their appearance. We're talking about nose jobs, cheek implants, and even early forms of hair transplants using techniques that modern plastic surgeons are still trying to understand. The procedures were incredibly sophisticated. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the Max Planck Institute found evidence that Egyptian surgeons were performing rhinoplasty using techniques that wouldn't be redeveloped in Europe until the Renaissance. They were reshaping noses, enhancing jawlines, and even performing early forms of eyelid surgery to create the perfect masculine aesthetic. The recovery time must have been brutal. Ancient Egyptian Dr. Barbara Adams from the Petrie Museum found evidence of specialized healing makeup designed to camouflage surgical sites during recovery. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Egyptian male beauty culture was their approach to aging. Dr. Christian Amour from École Normale Supérieure analyzed cosmetic formulations specifically designed for mature men and found sophisticated anti-aging treatments that rival modern skincare science. Egyptian men were using chemical peels made from fruit acids, anti-wrinkle treatments containing compounds that modern research has validated as effective, and hair dyes that were so advanced They could create natural look-color gradations. The Cairo Museum houses the social expectations around male grooming were absolutely rigorous. The Wilbur Papyrus contains detailed guidelines for how men of different social classes should maintain their appearance. Lower-ranking officials were required to spend at least 1 hour daily on grooming, while High Court officials were expected to dedicate 3 to 4 hours every day to their beauty routines. Dr. Selma Ikram from the American University in Cairo found evidence that Egyptian fathers would begin training their sons in makeup application and skincare from age 10. By adolescence, wealthy young men were expected to master complex cosmetic techniques that would serve them throughout their careers in government or temple service. The economic impact was staggering. That's more than most modern people spend on housing. But the pressure took a psychological toll. Dr. Geraldine Pinch from Oxford University found papyrus letters between Egyptian men expressing anxiety about their appearance that sounds remarkably modern. One letter dating to approximately 1400 BCE contains this plaintive passage. "My friend, I fear that age is stealing my beauty faster than I can restore it. Each morning I see new imperfections that yesterday were hidden. How can a man maintain divine favor when his face betrays his mortality?" The most extreme cases involved what Dr. Andreas Nurek calls beauty addiction. Men who became so obsessed with their appearance. The British Museum houses the personal effects of one such individual. A court scribe whose possessions included 89 different cosmetic products, 23 different mirrors, and detailed daily logs of his beauty routine that stretch over 7 years. His final entries, written just days before his death, still focus obsessively on achieving the perfect eyebrow arch and ideal lip color. But perhaps the most touching discovery was made by Dr. Joyce Tildeley when she found evidence that some Egyptian men were teaching their beauty techniques to their sons as a way of bonding and passing on cultural knowledge. Father-son makeup sessions were apparently common among the upper classes, with elaborate tutorials. Roman beauty standards emphasized what they considered more natural masculine traits, effectively ending thousands of years of Egyptian male grooming traditions. Yet, the influence of Egyptian male beauty culture echoes through history. Many of the cosmetic techniques, skincare formulations, and aesthetic principles developed for Egyptian men were preserved and eventually influenced Renaissance grooming practices, which in turn shaped modern men's skincare and cosmetic industries. Today, as male grooming becomes increasingly sophisticated and socially accepted, we're essentially rediscovering principles that Egyptian men mastered thousands of years ago. As we dive deeper into the societal implications of Egyptian beauty culture, we're about to uncover how physical appearance became the foundation of a system so rigid and brutal that it could determine not just your social status, but literally whether you lived or died. If you think modern social media has created toxic beauty competition, wait until you hear how ancient Egyptian beauty standards literally turned appearance into a weapon of mass social destruction. What I'm about to reveal isn't just about vanity or fashion. It's about how an entire civilization weaponized physical appearance to create the most rigid, brutal, and psychologically. Dr. Mark Lehner's groundbreaking analysis of worker villages near the Giza pyramids revealed something that shattered our romantic notions of ancient Egyptian society. When his team examined the remains of pyramid builders, the people who literally created one of the world's wonders, they found evidence of deliberate aesthetic discrimination, so systematic it amounted to apartheid based on appearance. The workers were divided into strict hierarchical groups based entirely on their physical attributes and grooming standards. The supervisors, identifiable by their elaborate burial goods, had access to cosmetics, dental care, and body modification. The laborers, buried in simple. But this wasn't just about having nice things. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University discovered papyrus documents that revealed beauty standards were used as a form of social control, so sophisticated it would make modern dystopian novels seem optimistic. There were actual laws written into legal codes that restricted access to certain cosmetics, hairstyles, and clothing based on social class. The Wilbur Papyrus contains what Dr. Richard Jasnow from Johns Hopkins University calls appearance regulations that are breathtaking in their detail and cruelty. Servants were legally forbidden from wearing makeup that made them appear too attractive, as this was considered. Dr. Andrea McDowell's analysis of Deir el-Medina village records shows that a servant who was caught wearing unauthorized makeup could face punishments ranging from public humiliation to physical mutilation. There are documented cases of people having their eyebrows permanently removed for wearing kohl without permission. But the upper classes weren't just maintaining their beauty privilege. They were actively sabotaging anyone who tried to cross class boundaries through appearance enhancement. Dr. Joyce Tildeley from the University of Manchester found evidence of what she calls beauty espionage. Wealthy families hiring spies to monitor lower-class individuals who might be. Nibet was a talented weaver who had saved enough money to buy basic cosmetics and improve her appearance. When she began attracting attention from men above her social class, a group of wealthy women conspired to have her accused of theft, claiming she must have stolen the money to afford her beauty treatments, since someone of her class couldn't possibly afford them legitimately. Nibet was convicted and sentenced to have her face branded, permanently marking her as a criminal and destroying any possibility of social advancement through marriage or other means. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol found that this wasn't an isolated case. Beauty-related false accusations were a common tactic used by the upper classes to maintain social boundaries. The psychological warfare was even more sophisticated. Dr. Zorwas discovered at Saqqara what he calls beauty intimidation protocols, systematic methods wealthy Egyptians used to psychologically dominate lower classes through conspicuous display of cosmetic enhancement. During public festivals, wealthy women would appear wearing makeup so elaborate and expensive that it would take a commoner's entire annual income to afford a single day's application. This wasn't just showing off. It was a calculated demonstration of social power designed to remind everyone exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. The most brutal example was something called the humiliation of mirrors. The psychological impact of this forced comparison was so devastating that several servants are recorded as having attempted suicide after these sessions. But the class warfare went beyond just individual cruelty. It was institutionalized in ways that would make modern sociologists weep. Dr. Daniel Antoine from the British Museum analyzed burial sites across different social strata and found that the beauty gap between classes was actually widening over time, not narrowing. In the Old Kingdom, there was some social mobility based on merit and achievement. But by the New Kingdom, beauty standards had become so elaborate and expensive that crossing class boundaries became virtual. The mathematical precision of this system is astounding. Dr. David Silverman from the University of Pennsylvania calculated that during the height of the New Kingdom, a lower-caste person would need to work for approximately 847 years to afford the cosmetic treatments that a wealthy person used in a single month. The beauty gap wasn't just wide. It was astronomically, impossibly vast. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect was how this system destroyed family relationships. Dr. Selma Ikram from the American University in Cairo found evidence of families being torn apart when one member achieved unexpected social advancement and gained access to better beauty treatments. The case of a man. When he returned to his village or his father's funeral, his own family didn't recognize him and initially refused to believe he was related to them. His transformation through beauty enhancement had been so complete that it severed his connection to his origins. The competitive pressure within social classes was equally destructive. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum found evidence of what she calls beauty arms races within wealthy communities, where families would bankrupt themselves trying to maintain cosmetic superiority over their neighbors. One papyrus business record describes a wealthy merchant who sold his entire estate to afford a single elaborate wig for his daughter's wedding, believing that But the most insidious aspect of this system was how it convinced people that their social position was natural and deserved. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the Max Planck Institute found evidence that lower-us Egyptians actually internalized beauty-based class distinctions, believing that their inability to afford cosmetic enhancement was evidence of their inherent unworthiness. Papyrus letters between servants contain heartbreaking passages where people blame themselves for their social position, writing things like, "Surely the gods made me plain so that I would know my proper place in society." They had been so completely psychologically dominated that they accepted aesthetic discrimination. Priests would actually refuse to accept offerings from people who weren't properly groomed according to their social class, creating a religious justification for appearance-based discrimination. But resistance existed, and it was both inspiring and tragic. Dr. Christian Amata from Echo Lormal Superior discovered evidence of underground cosmetic networks where lower-as people would share beauty treatments and techniques in secret. These were essentially beauty speak-easies, hidden communities where people could temporarily escape the aesthetic oppression of their daily lives. The punishments for participating in these networks were severe. The Cairo Museum houses legal. The most remarkable resistance movement was led by a woman known only as the beautifier of the poor. Dr. Joanne Fletcher found references to this mysterious figure in multiple papyrus sources from the late period. She apparently operated a network that provided free cosmetic treatments to lower-as women, funded by wealthy sympathizers who had grown disgusted with the system's cruelty. The authorities spent enormous resources trying to capture her, suggesting that her activities were seen as a genuine threat to social order. The fact that someone's entire identity was built around subverting beauty-based class oppression tells you everything you need to know about how central appearance had become to Egyptians. The Persians, Greeks, and Romans all had different approaches to beauty and social hierarchy, gradually eroding the rigid aesthetic caste system that had dominated Egypt for millennia. Yet, the psychological patterns established by Egyptian beauty-based class warfare echo through history. Every society that has used appearance as a marker of social worth, every culture that has denied access to beauty enhancement based on economic status, every system that has convinced people their physical appearance determines their social value, they're all following a template that ancient Egypt perfected thousands of years ago. What's both remarkable and disturbing is how little has fundamentally changed. We still use cosmetic access as a form of social sorting that can determine life outcomes. The ancient Egyptians just had the honesty to make it official policy instead of pretending it doesn't happen. As we approach the culmination of our journey through Egyptian beauty culture, we're about to witness the spectacular failures that brought this entire system crashing down. Because when you build a civilization on the foundation of impossible aesthetic standards, eventually reality comes calling with a bill that no amount of cosmetics can pay. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the biggest failures. In ancient Egypt's beauty obsession produced some catastrophes so spectacular, they make It's about how the relentless pursuit of impossible beauty standards led to disasters that toppled dynasties, sparked rebellions, and literally changed the course of human history. Buckle up, because these beauty fails were legendary in the worst possible way. Let's start with what Dr. Zahi Hawass calls the Great Wig Catastrophe of 1323 BCE. A disaster so absurd it sounds like ancient comedy, But the consequences were deadly serious. During a major religious festival honoring the goddess Hathor, Queen Anessen appeared wearing a ceremonial wig that was so elaborate it required its own structural support system. Dr. Andreas Nerlich from the University of Munich analyzed the remains of this contraption and found that it weighed approximately 67 Klebe, more than many modern teenagers. Here's where things went spectacularly wrong. Midway through the ceremony, the support structure failed. The entire wig collapsed, crushing several priests, releasing dozens of panicked birds into the sacred temple, and flooding the ceremonial area with the water features. Queen Aneseneman was knocked unconscious and had to be carried away, but not before the crowd had witnessed what they interpreted as the gods rejecting her offering. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University found that this single cosmetic disaster triggered but mechanical failures were nothing compared to the chemical disasters that plagued Egyptian beauty culture. Dr. Christian Amour from École Normale Supérieure discovered what he calls the purple face epidemic of 1567 BCE, a cosmetic catastrophe that affected hundreds of wealthy women simultaneously. A popular makeup artist named Katie had developed what he claimed was a revolutionary new rouge made from divine flowers imported from the land of Punt. Chemical analysis by Dr. Amouri revealed that this divine rouge was actually made from a plant that contained high levels of a compound that reacts with sunlight to produce a permanent purple stain. The disaster unfolded during the op-ed fest. Within hours, their faces had turned a vivid purple that wouldn't wash off. Dr. Joyce Tildeley from the University of Manchester found papyrus accounts describing the scene. The noble ladies appeared as if they had been bruised by the gods themselves, their faces the color of dark grapes. The social consequences were devastating. These women couldn't appear in public for months while the staining gradually faded. Many marriages were called off. Business deals fell through, and some families faced financial ruin because their female members couldn't fulfill social obligations. Dr. Andrea McDowell found evidence that several of the affected women attempted suicide rather than face the public. His tomb inscription, discovered by Dr. Melinda Hartwig at the Metropolitan Museum, reads, "He who sought to beautify the divine, but instead marked them for shame, may his vanity poison him for eternity." But perhaps the most shocking beauty disaster involved Queen Nefertiti herself. Dr. Joan Fletcher from the University of York made a discovery that has been quietly discussed among Egyptologists for years, but rarely shared with the public. Evidence that Nefertiti's famous beauty was actually the result of extensive cosmetic surgery that went catastrophically wrong. Analysis of Nefertiti's possible mummy reveals evidence of multiple surgical procedures on her face, including what appears the famous bust of Nefertiti that we all know and love. It might actually be propaganda, an idealized portrait created to hide the reality of her surgical disasters. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol found evidence that in her later years, Nefertiti rarely appeared in public and always wore elaborate makeup and veils when she did. The psychological impact of this transformation apparently drove Nefertiti to increasingly desperate beauty treatments. Dr. Daniel Antoine from the British Museum found evidence that she was using cosmetics with lead concentrations so high they would have caused neurological damage, personality changes, and eventual death. But individual disasters CEE, an economic catastrophe triggered by cosmetic overproduction that nearly destroyed the Egyptian economy. During the reign of Ramesses III, the cosmetic industry had grown so large that it consumed nearly 60% of Egypt's gold production, 40% of its agricultural output, and employed over 200,000 people in various beauty-related occupations. The system had become completely unsustainable, but no one wanted to admit it because the entire social structure depended on maintaining impossible beauty standards. The collapse began when a series of poor harvests reduced the availability of key cosmetic ingredients. Prices skyrocketed, but wealthy Egyptians The situation reached a breaking point when workers at cosmetic factories, who were being paid in beauty products rather than food, began dying of hunger while their employers hoarded increasingly worthless makeup. The resulting riots and strikes paralyzed the Egyptian economy for over 2 years. Dr. Mark Lehner found evidence that this cosmetic-driven economic collapse was one of the factors that made Egypt vulnerable to the Sea People's invasions that marked the end of the New Kingdom period. An entire civilization brought down partly by lipstick and eyeshadow. It's almost too absurd to believe, but the archaeological evidence is undeniable. But perhaps the most personally tragic beauty disaster was the problem was that Meriton had what we would now recognize as body dysmorphia. And the new artistic style that showed more realistic human proportions made her obsess over every perceived flaw in her appearance. Court records describe her spending up to 12 hours daily on beauty treatments, refusing to eat until she achieved the perfect appearance, and eventually becoming so emaciated that she couldn't stand without assistance. The most heartbreaking detail comes from a letter she wrote to her father, discovered by Dr. Geraldine Pinch from Oxford University. "My divine Father, I have studied the new art you have created, and I see that even goddesses have imperfections. If this is beauty, then I am further from it than the moon is from the earth. Grant me permission to withdraw from the world until I can make myself worthy of divine sight." Meriton died at age 19, apparently from complications related to her extreme beauty regimen. Her mummy, if correctly identified, shows evidence of severe malnutrition, chemical poisoning from cosmetic overuse, and what appears to be self-inflicted injuries from obsessive grooming. The pattern repeats throughout Egyptian history. Individuals and entire communities destroyed by the pursuit of impossible beauty standards, innovative techniques backfiring spectacularly, and social systems collapsing under the weight of unsustainable aesthetic expectations. Dr. Barbara Adams from the Petrie Museum found evidence of what she calls beauty. One such event in 1430 BCE was triggered by rumors that the gods had changed their beauty preferences. Within days, thousands of people were destroying their existing cosmetic collections and desperately seeking new products that matched the alleged divine updates. The economic disruption lasted for months, and several people died in stampedes at cosmetic markets. But perhaps the most revealing beauty disaster was the simplest. Dr. Joyce Tildeley found evidence of a wealthy woman who died from an allergic reaction to henna hair dye. This wasn't exotic or experimental. It was one of the most common, supposedly safe beauty treatments available. Her death sparked what Dr. Andreas Nerlich calls the first recorded case of product liability litigation. The case revealed that virtually every cosmetic product in Egypt contained potentially dangerous ingredients. But the social pressure to use them was so intense that people continued despite knowing the risks. What all these disasters have in common is that they were predictable, preventable, and ignored because the social and psychological pressure to maintain beauty standards overrode basic common sense. People literally chose beauty over life again and again, even when the consequences were obvious and devastating. The really tragic part is how little we've learned from these ancient cautionary tales. Modern cosmetic disasters, from dangerous skin bleaching to botched surgeries, still ignoring obvious warning signs, still prioritizing appearance over well-being. The ancient Egyptians just had the excuse of not knowing better. We don't. But these spectacular failures weren't the end of Egyptian beauty culture. They were the catalyst for its transformation into something that would influence every civilization that followed as we approach the final chapters of our journey. We're about to discover how the lessons learned from these disasters shaped beauty standards that are still with us today, for better and for worse. The threads connecting ancient Egyptian cosmetics to your morning skincare routine are more direct than you might imagine. Every time you apply eyeliner, what's about to unfold isn't just historical curiosity. It's the untold story of how a 5,000-year-old obsession with physical perfection became the blueprint for modern beauty culture. And some of these connections will absolutely blow your mind. Dr. Mandy Aftel, a leading perfumer and fragrance historian, spent over 2 decades reverse engineering ancient Egyptian cosmetic formulation, and what she discovered revolutionized the modern beauty industry. Working with chemical analysis from Dr. Barbara Adams at the Petrie Museum, she found that Egyptian cosmetic chemists had developed techniques that modern companies are still trying to perfect. Take waterproof mascara, for example. We think it was invented. The ancient Egyptians had perfected waterproof eye makeup 4,000 years before modern cosmetic companies figured it out. But here's where it gets really wild. Major cosmetic corporations are actively studying these ancient formulations. Dr. Joyce Tildesley from the University of Manchester revealed that companies like L'Oreal, Estée Lauder, and Procter & Gamble have teams of archivists whose job is to analyze ancient cosmetic residues and adapt the findings for modern products. The results are everywhere, hiding in plain sight. That expensive anti-aging serum you might use, there's a good chance it contains. But the influence goes far beyond just ingredients. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum made a fascinating discovery about the psychological foundations of modern beauty culture when she analyzed ancient Egyptian beauty texts and compared them to modern advertising psychology. She found that we're using virtually identical persuasion techniques. The ancient Egyptians were the first civilization to market beauty products using fear of aging, social rejection, and spiritual inadequacy. Sound familiar? Modern beauty advertising still uses these exact same psychological pressure points that Egyptian cosmetic sellers mastered thousands of years ago. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University found replace sacred oils with miracle serum and you've got a contemporary beauty ad. But perhaps the most shocking connection involves our modern obsession with influencer culture. Dr. Zahi Hawass discovered evidence that ancient Egypt had its own version of beauty influences. Wealthy women whose makeup and styling choices were copied throughout society. These divine beauties would appear at public events, showcasing new cosmetic techniques, and within days everyone would be trying to recreate their looks. The British Museum houses ostrich limestone fragments covered with what Dr. Daniel Antoine calls ancient beauty tutorials. These are detailed instructions for recreating the makeup looks of famous. The parallels to modern social media are uncanny. Dr. Andrea McDowell found evidence that these beauty influencers would deliberately create dramatic new looks to maintain public attention, often pushing increasingly extreme styles to stay relevant. Some would even stage public beauty failures to generate sympathy and discussion. They had essentially invented viral marketing through cosmetic controversy. But the most direct connection between ancient Egypt and modern beauty culture involves our relationship with mirrors. Dr. Selma Ikram from the American University in Cairo made a discovery that perfectly explains our current selfie obsession. Ancient Egyptians were the first. They had created a system of obsessive self-monitoring that's remarkably similar to modern social media behavior. Except instead of posting photos, they were writing detailed reports about their appearance. Dr. Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol found that these appearance logs often contain the same psychological patterns we see in modern body dysmorphia. Obsessive focus on minor imperfections, constant comparison to idealized standards, and devastating emotional responses to perceived flaws. The ancient Egyptians had essentially invented the psychological framework for modern beauty anxiety, complete with daily rituals of self-examination and social comparison that would be instantly recognizable to any modern. Contouring. Ancient Egyptians invented it using light and dark pigments to reshape facial features. Dr. Joanne Fletcher found evidence of contouring techniques so sophisticated that modern makeup artists are still studying them for inspiration. False eyelashes. Egyptian innovation. using everything from human hair to bird feathers to create dramatic eye enhancement. The Metropolitan Museum houses examples that look remarkably similar to modern strip lashes. Even plastic surgery has Egyptian roots. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from the Max Planck Institute found evidence of cosmetic surgical procedures that use techniques remarkably extreme calorie restriction, obsessive exercise, and the use of dangerous supplements to achieve impossible body standards. The ancient Egyptians had protein powders made from ground insects, appetite suppressants derived from toxic plants, and exercise regimens so extreme they regularly caused injury and death. They had essentially created the prototype for modern wellness culture, complete with all its potential for self-destruction. Even our modern spa culture traces directly back to ancient Egypt. Dr. Mark Lehner found evidence of elaborate beauty treatment facilities that offered services remarkably similar to modern luxury spas, mud baths, aromatherapy, massage therapy, and even early forms of hydration. They were about temporary escape from social pressure, community bonding among women, and the illusion of controlling aging and mortality through beauty rituals. Dr. Barbara Adams from the Petrie Museum found that wealthy Egyptian women would spend days at these facilities, not because they needed extensive beauty treatments, but because the spa environment provided relief from the crushing social pressure to maintain perfect appearance at all times. The business models were surprisingly similar too. Dr. Joyce Tilsley found evidence of ancient spa membership systems, loyalty programs, and even early forms of beauty product sales that operated almost exactly like modern wellness industry practices. But perhaps the most Dr. Christian Amor found evidence that Egyptian physicians had developed treatment protocols for beauty-related mental health issues that include techniques still used in modern therapy: cognitive restructuring, exposure therapy, and social support systems. The ancient Egyptians understood something that modern psychology is still catching up to. Beauty culture can be psychologically destructive if taken to extremes, and societies need systematic approaches to help people maintain healthy relationships with their appearance. But they also understood beauty's positive potential. Dr. Daniel Antoine found evidence that moderate beauty enhancement was associated with improved self. As the civilization matured, beauty standards became more inclusive, diverse, and psychologically healthy. They had learned from their own extremes and developed more sustainable approaches to aesthetic enhancement. This gives us a roadmap for modern beauty culture. We can appreciate the artistry, science, and psychological benefits of beauty enhancement, while avoiding the destructive extremes that characterized peak Egyptian beauty obsession. As we prepare for our final chapter together, we'll explore what all of these connections mean for us today. How understanding ancient Egypt's beauty, triumphs, and disasters can help us navigate our own relationship with appearance, social media. What does this incredible, shocking, and sometimes heartbreaking journey through ancient Egyptian aesthetics actually mean for us today? As I look back on everything we've discovered, from radioactive golden skin treatments to deadly kohl applications, from million-dollar wigs to class warfare fought with cosmetics, I see patterns that are both timeless and urgently relevant to our modern world. The truth is, we never really left ancient Egypt. We just moved the temples online and replaced the pharaohs with influencers. Dr. Rachel Kojiro from the University of Western Ontario conducted a fascinating study in 2019, comparing ancient Egyptian beauty texts with modern social media behavior. Watch the ancient Egyptians who spent 3 hours daily applying makeup. Meet the modern teenagers who spend 3 hours daily perfecting their social media presence. The wealthy Egyptian women who bankrupted their families for cosmetic treatments. Meet the millions of people going into debt for cosmetic procedures today. The Egyptian beauty influencers who stage dramatic looks for public attention. Well, That one doesn't need much explanation, does it? But here's what gives me hope. Understanding this history means we can make different choices. The ancient Egyptians didn't have the benefit of psychological research, social science, or historical perspective. They were pioneering beauty culture without a roadmap, making it up as they went along, and we have the luxury of their experience to learn from. We can see where beauty culture leads when it becomes disconnected from health, happiness, and human dignity. We can recognize the warning signs of a society that values appearance over well-being. And most importantly, we can choose a different path. Dr. Fredrickson and Roberts from the University of Colorado developed what they call objectification theory, which helps explain why both ancient Egyptian and modern beauty cultures can become so destructive. When societies teach people to view themselves primarily as objects to be looked at, rather than subjects with their own. Dr. Salma Ikram's research revealed that Egyptian beauty culture at its best was about transformation, self-respect, and spiritual connection. It was about honoring the divine spark within yourself and presenting your best self to the world. The difference between healthy and unhealthy beauty culture isn't about how much effort you put into your appearance. It's about why you're doing it and how it makes you feel. When beauty enhancement increases your confidence, helps you express your creativity, or simply brings you joy, it's serving a positive function. When it becomes a source of anxiety, financial stress, or self-hatred, it's time to step back and reassess. They had developed what we might call sustainable beauty culture approaches to aesthetic enhancement that emphasized balance, individual expression, and psychological health. Their final beauty wisdom carved into temple walls at Philly reads, "True beauty flows from a spirit at peace with itself. The gods prefer a genuine smile to perfect features, a kind heart to flawless skin, and a confident soul to the most elaborate adornment." That's a lesson worth remembering as we navigate our own beauty landscape. Whether we're scrolling through social media, standing in front of mirrors, or making decisions about how to present ourselves to the world. So, what can we take from this extraordinary journey? First, the ancient Egyptians got caught in the trap of believing that physical beauty determined spiritual worth, social value, and even chances of eternal salvation. We know better. Your value comes from who you are, not how you look. Second, that sustainable beauty culture is possible. We can appreciate artistry, enjoy enhancement, and take pleasure in aesthetic expression without sacrificing our health, finances, or psychological well-being. The key is maintaining perspective and remembering that beauty is meant to serve us, not the other way around. Third, that the pressure you might feel to look perfect isn't personal, it's historical. You're not weak or vain for caring about your appearance. Understanding this can help reduce the shame and self-judgment that often accompany beauty-related struggles. And finally, that you have more power than you realize. Every time you choose self-acceptance over self-criticism, every time you prioritize health over appearance, every time you resist the pressure to pursue impossible standards, you're helping to create a more humane beauty culture for everyone. The ancient Egyptians gave us incredible gifts, the foundations of cosmetic science, the artistry of aesthetic enhancement, and the understanding that beauty can be a form of self-expression and spiritual practice. But they also gave us a cautionary tale about what happens when beauty culture becomes detached from wisdom. Take care of yourself. Enhance your appearance in ways that bring you joy and express your unique aesthetic vision. But do it from a place of self-love, not self-rejection. Do it to honor your authentic self, not to become someone else. And remember that the most beautiful thing about you isn't anything you can apply, inject, or surgically enhance. It's the spark of consciousness behind your eyes, the unique way you experience and respond to the world, and the love and kindness you bring to the people around you. The ancient Egyptians spent thousands of years trying to perfect external beauty while sometimes losing. Thank you for taking this incredible journey with me through the sands of time and the depths of human nature. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, remember that you are part of an unbroken chain of people who have looked in mirrors, experimented with enhancement, and sought to present their best selves to the world. You're connected to queens and pharaohs, to artists and innovators, to dreamers and creators who understood that caring for your appearance is one of the many ways humans express love for themselves and respect for others. And as always, I can't wait to share the next chapter of our historical adventures together. Sweet dreams, and may you wake up feeling as radiant as any ancient Egyptian. Not because of perfect features, but because of the